I identify as Native, but I have full white privilege, and my experience is very different from Seth. Seth, do you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Seth. I'm Native too. I'm from the Cheyenne Arapaho tribe. My Native name is Firewolf.
And so Seth and I usually talk a little bit about Native culture, and then we talk about the land. And today what we're going to talk about is Seth has a new experience coming up that we're very excited about. So do you want to tell them what you'll be doing this summer?
In July, I'll be going to Vermont, where I'll be going to it's a college, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where I'll be learning the Abenaki language with a Native teacher. And I'll be doing archery and doing drum circle, and what else am I doing?
Beading. He's going to be fully immersed in Native culture and language, even though Abenaki's not the language of Seth's tribe. Cheyenne and Arapaho, there's two languages. The Abenaki language is very similar to Cheyenne, so he'll be able to learn a language that's very similar to one of his languages.
And I'll be going for 2 weeks. So I'm very excited about that.
And I'm very jealous about that. But I got those opportunities when I was growing up. So I'm really happy that Seth is going to have the opportunity. I just wish I could go as well. And then we always talk about the land and the land acknowledgement, which is I think it's a fairly new thing that people do in different organizations and things. But I always say, as a Native person, to talk about the land is like asking us to talk about like our right arm. Like, it's just so intrinsically a part of us that it's kind of weird to do a land acknowledgement. But Seth and I are on the land of the Mohican and the Mohawk where we are now, and we honor their people by observing what they held dear, which is the land, and being caretakers of the land, and making sure that we respect the land in the ways that they respected the land. And one thing we always like to do is talk about our favorite part of the land and why we love the land so much. So Seth, do you want to talk about what you love about the land? And
my favorite part to me is just being out there. It's just relaxing to me. Last year we went to Iceland, and we all as a family just loved it, everything about it, because they respect it so much. Like, what was it that you said? Like, they just like they have respect to it, and
they respect the land the way Native people respect the land. They it's illegal like to cut the moss, so the moss is thousands of years old. When they build a road, they build it around stones because the stones were there first. It's illegal to pull your car off on the side of the road because it disturbs the land. So you can tell that the land has been loved. The air is cleaner, the water is cleaner. I mean, the food is better. Like, you can tell that
the water fresh. They don't have like water fountains or anything. You can just get it from the ground.
Like from any faucet is clean water. So yeah, there's a real difference when someone respects the land and how they treat it. So yeah, we love that.
Yeah, we also go kayaking together too. So
we love doing that. Yeah, that's one of our favorite things to do together is kayak and be out on the water. Do you want to add anything else?
No, that's it. I mean, I just enjoy it so much.
So I will hand it back over to you, Olivia. Thank you all.
Yes, thank you so much, Sam and Seth. I love that introduction every single time. I'm now going to pass it over to our facilitator, Rox, to give us some grounding for tonight.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Just want to give some reminders for the meeting today. So those of you who are joining us and are new, or just for a reminder for everyone, this is a space mainly for BIPOC folks to share out loud. We are trying to be intentional about creating a space where BIPOC folks can be amplified and there can be a space for them to share. If you do not identify as BIPOC or you do not face racism in your everyday life, we do ask you just to share in the chat. So you're welcome to use the reaction button at the bottom of your screen, send anything you want in the chat, hype up someone who said something that you like. That's very welcome. But we do ask, if you are white identified or do not face racism every day, to just stick to the chat and provide space and amplifying the voices of folks who do face it every day. This is a space of discomfort. We're not expecting everyone to be comfortable with the conversations that we have, given that in society, sometimes we just don't have these conversations. But we welcome discomfort, and we encourage you to kind of lean in and be uncomfortable with all of us at the same time, and share and let us know. And then we also encourage, if you can and you're comfortable, to keep your camera on. This can kind of be intimidating to share to a group of folks and it just be like names, not knowing if people are really listening or people are hearing you out. So if you can keep your camera on, wonderful, but also like we do understand you might be driving in between something. So if that's not possible, you still are welcome to share. Just as a side note, we also encourage participants to take care of themselves. So if this becomes overwhelming or there's any way you're triggered, please feel free to step away, to turn off your camera, to do what you need to do that is best for you and that will be energizing to you, recharging to you. We do want you to take care of yourselves and just know that like we welcome that in this space as well. We also want to reiterate to please share your experiences, but keep the names of like your organization, names, supervisors, anything like that, for your protection of yourself, but also like the protection of others. This is and can be a confidential space, but also like if you share that information, then it becomes just a risk. And then kind of the last thing we want to remind everyone on is that things might offend you in the meeting. Someone might say something that might make you feel uncomfortable. You might feel like personally attacked or anything of that nature. But this is also a brave space, so tensions will rise. Just like we mentioned, it might be a little bit uncomfy, but we understand and we're trying to understand every day our own triggers. And there's often a lot of growth in being uncomfortable. So we just, again, ask you to lean into that. We do value and welcome difference in opinion. So if someone says something, you're like, I don't necessarily agree with that, please share. I think there are always times where people don't agree, and we want to welcome that into this space as well. And then, yeah, so that's kind of going to be our common agreement moving forward. And I will pass it off to Melody to give us some principles of our community.
Thank you, Rox. We established these principles of community. You can think of them as ground rules. The first one is to recognize. We recognize that we must strive to overcome historical and divisive biases, such as racism and sexism in our society, all of us here. We acknowledge that we are systematically taught misinformation about our own groups, as well as about the members of other groups. This is true for everyone, regardless of your group or affiliation. Super important is no blame. We agree not to blame ourselves or others for the misinformation we have learned, but to accept that responsibility for not repeating misinformation after we have learned otherwise, because that's really where it's at in social work. The next one is respect. We agree to listen respectfully to each other without interruptions. Only one person speaks at a time. However, this does not mean we should ignore problematic statements. Both approaches are valid here on calling in and calling out. So the goal is to help each other learn. We acknowledge that we all may be at different stages of learning on the content and the discussion topics. Individual experience. We agree that no one should be required or expected to speak for their whole race or their gender. We can't, even if we wanted to. Being American Indian, we do not represent 574 different tribes, nor do we represent our own tribes. Heck, I can barely represent my family at times. The next one is trust. Everyone here has come to the table to learn, grow, and share. We will trust that people are doing the best that they can. We all make mistakes and have bad days. When these occur, let's challenge and encourage each other to do better. Once we acknowledge once again, we may be at different stages of learning on the topic. Share the air. So share responsibility for including all voices in the discussion. If you find that you have a tendency to dominate discussions, take a step back and help the group invite others to speak. If you tend to stay quiet, challenge yourself to share ideas so that others can learn from you. If you're exceedingly quiet, do expect that the facilitator will call on you in meetings to participate. So another important tenet is not experts. We are experienced facilitators. We do not claim to be experts. We are here to facilitate a process and a discussion. Along with everyone in this group, all of us here, we're here to learn alongside you. Everyone has an opinion. Opinions, however, are not the same as informed knowledge backed up by research. So depending on the topic and context, both are valid, but it's important to know the difference. To engage in deep learning, we will want to lean more towards informed knowledge and gain practice reflecting and speaking thoughtfully on difficult topics. Lastly, ask for help. It's okay not to know. Keep in mind that we are all still learning and bound to make mistakes when approaching a complex task or exploring new ideas like today's topic. Be open to changing your mind and make space for others to do so as well.
Thank you so much, Melody. So before we get started with tonight's topic, I'm just going to ask the facilitators to introduce themselves. I'll give a brief introduction about myself. My name is Olivia Knox. I am the Communications Associate for the New York State chapter of NASW. I am currently in my last semester of my master's program at Stony Brook University, specializing in community policy and political social action, and I am counting down the days to my graduation. I'm now going to pass it over to Rox to introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Rox. I use she, they pronouns, and I attend NYU as a 2-year MSW student, and I currently intern at the National Association of Social Work, the New York State chapter. I'll pass it to Melody.
Thank you. No, Melody on Matsiwa. My name is Melody Lopez. I'm Hopi Navajo and Pueblo. I'm the owner of Indigenous Strategies here in Tucson, Arizona, which is on the traditional homelands of the Ana'atam Nation and contemporary tribal lands of Pasco-Yaqui tribe. I say that because I maintain a relationship with both tribes in all the work that I do. I'm passing it on to Kelly.
Yeah, it's Kelly Ray Bio and she gets what it's in slow. John Aid Neighbors Chin. They Chinich Che do a corny Naidashinella. A without a stun Nishna, a without Shadeje. So hello everybody, my name is Kelly Vio. I am Navajo / Acoma Pueblo. So that's I am located in Arizona, so I'm part of the Southwest tribes of Arizona and New Mexico. I am in my last semester as well in the MSW program at Arizona State University. My major is in policy advocacy and policy administration and community. So just like Olivia, I'm so counting down the days that I graduate because I just want this to be over. For those that are in MSW, you totally get it, or in school in general. And so I'm also interning actually with Miss Melody with Indigenous Strategies, specifically under Honor Collective. And so I am a part of the various committees under Honor Collective. So welcome everybody.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And I'm now going to pass it over to Tiana to introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tiana Robinson, and I am a senior majoring in social work at Skidmore College in Saratoga Springs. And I'm also interning with the NASW, New York State chapter, working closely with Olivia and Samantha.
Thank you so much, Tiana. So I'm now going to pose our first question for tonight. So please feel free to unmute and, engage in discussion with us. So through capitalism and the nonprofit industrial complex, it's It upholds inequity and diminishes resistance. In what ways, as social workers, do we see this in our practice, in our education, or even just in our personal lives?
So I'm wondering if everyone out there is familiar with the term nonprofit industrial complex, Olivia? Do we maybe want to paste in a term and discuss that a little bit?
Yes, so I will put something in the chat right now for everyone to read.
While you're doing that, Olivia, should I I could just go into giving a little brief about nonprofit industrial complex. So during this research, I wasn't too familiar with it, but then just from my understanding of it, it is like a system of relationships between the state and various other arms of government, businesses, individuals, and nonprofits. And within those relationships, it usually focuses on advancing other people's that are upholding capitalism, their own personal interests, rather than the interests of certain population at risk, Black and Brown communities and marginalized communities. And that just goes into diminishing radical and coalition building, and also the union and togetherness of other communities and BIPOC communities that come together to fight the system of oppression that capitalism upholds. Also with the profit industrial complex, specifically dealing with nonprofits, they're in a sense monitored by these private entities that have control over certain funding and benefits when it comes to monitoring, trying to socially control radical and community building within Black and Brown communities. So that's just a little blurb of how it just diminishes resistance within those communities and within those organizations that help to decenter whiteness and try to see perspectives and come from an anti-oppressive practice to build the career and profession and education of social work as we see it today. So that's just a little bit about how it is connected to social work and certain organizations that help with radical change in the society as we live in it today.
Thank you so much for that history, Tiana. I do see Betty has raised her hand.
I have. Thank you, Olivia and Tiana. That was great. Thank you for breaking that down. And for a Monday evening, you made my brain that much easier to comment. So thank you. My camera's not working, but I am fully present. And I promise I look like the person in the picture. That's me. But I wanted to share, as a person who has either directed or worked for a number of nonprofits whose names we definitely will not drop in this space. Yeah, it can be tough because you're doing the work and there are a number of entities that are funding the work who are saying, like, here's the money, here's how to do it, but they have no idea how to do the work. So they're essentially directing how to do social work first and foremost, and then directing how to engage with the community. And I think someone said it in the chat just a couple of comments ago, it's really about like the numbers and not the actual outcomes. It's very frustrating. It's not social worky. And the most important lesson I've learned pre-pandemic, but ongoing in this pandemic, there's no substitute for the work, because otherwise I quit every single day, but I come back because there's no substitute for the work. But I quit probably 5 minutes ago. I'm going back tomorrow. But yeah, there's no substitute for work. There's no substitute for the work. There's no substitute for the work.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Betty, for sharing. As you were sharing with us, somebody put in the chat, it also prioritizes quantity, funding, and billable hours over humanizing and recognizing barriers and oppressive systems. So that's exactly what you were just speaking to. I did see, I believe someone else had their hand up. I missed the name, but if you had your hand up, please feel free to unmute and share with us. Oh, there we go. Yes, please feel free. Oh,
Hi, can you hear me?
yes.
Sorry, my phone is running out of battery, which is why my video is off. My name is Shiro. She, they pronouns, and identify as a Black queer woman. Thank you for providing the space to talk about this today. So just kind of thinking about what's been shared so far and some of the things that have been expressed in the chat, I think kind of about the value of short-term models and how organizations value working with certain insurance providers over other providers because of the need to fund organizations. But at times that can be very classist and kind of like the particular insurances that people accept. A lot of places that I've worked with in the past and even currently don't want to kind of accept Medicaid or manage Medicaid plans because the reimbursement rates are low. And so individuals are not able to get services that they really need. And so when you kind of pose that question, those are some of the things that came up for me.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Gerald, your hand is up.
This is making me think about something that has always troubled me, and that is social work intern labor. And so agencies will have our interns come in, they will be given a caseload, and then that productivity, I think, typically is given to the supervising social worker. But there's a monetary, and the intern is paying to be there. So where I am now, we've got psychology interns, we've got psychiatry interns. They are paid employees. We are not. We pay for our coursework, and then we get there, and we're not compensated. I mean, there are some places, I think the VA right now has a small stipend. There are some places that have some stipends, but I think that's the exception, and it should be the rule. And speaking about underserved populations, I often think about our folks that are psychiatrically disabled and discharge planning and where they go live. And so you've got folks that have SSD, SSI, that is their only income, and then they are going to live at a place that's providing a bed, little stimulation elsewhere, and 3 meals and 2 snacks. And for that, they may get, $100 a week that they can spend. So these folks are locked into poverty with no hope of ever moving, constantly blamed for their illness. I think I'm getting off track, but so yeah, the money, when you talk about neoliberal capitalism, you've got neoliberal capitalism on one side, and then you've got the social determinants of mental health, right, on the other side of it. So you've got one part of it fighting the other. And the thing that I fight at work every day is we're not dealing with the societal causes of illness. And are we really doing social work? I mean, I think sometimes social workers, we are agents of control, rather than, but we've got student loans, we've got mortgages, we've got, so nobody's gonna be marching where I work, because they're worried about, their lives, their livelihoods. And I think the last time we had this, I spoke about, the folks that we serve, we're not there with them. They have to come to us, transportation barriers, if they can't make it, they're non-conforming or they're resistant, and we're not taking, any of the other, social factors, in line. And it is about money, and it is about time. The last thing I want to say is I have my own thing with evidence-based practice and manualized therapies. You know, these things were not made to really help people. They were there to cut costs. And you know, I think a lot of people are eclectic in their choices, and I think there's some good stuff in there. But as someone spoke to insurance companies, when you get 8 visits and a person with complex trauma, you know, so that's it.
Thank you so much for sharing with us, Gerald. Ralph, would you like to speak with us?
Yes, I actually worked in local government in Philadelphia for many years. Along a lot of that time, I actually worked for the local agency that received the Community Services Block Grant, which is a federal grant that has the goal of moving people out of poverty towards self-sufficiency. In the capacity, we also receive money that came out of state revenues as well as some local revenues in addition to those federal grants. And one thing that I notice is that many of the programs, even the programs that we were able to put on the table, in some cases, they were designed to fail. In saying that, programs, the staff often don't have the capacity to ensure success. And in addition to that, the goals of many programs are short-sighted. A person can go through a program and be considered successful, but yet they still aren't out of poverty. You know, maybe they've made strides toward getting out of poverty, but they never get out. To me, that's short-sighted. The same agencies that have been getting the money, by and large, they continue to get the money in spite of the results, in spite of the outcomes. And so there's also an issue of accountability and monitoring, and actually making sure that organizations that get money to provide services to people, that they are actually making a difference in the lives of the people who come through those programs. I'm not speaking very generally right now. I just wanted to say a few things initially, but I'm really disheartened that the status quo continues to be perpetuated. There seems to be little creativity when it comes to helping people. Social workers tend to be handicapped, and you know, we just don't have the resources that we need often to provide the assistance that people need.
Definitely. It you know, plays more into the capitalist structures than actually using that money to create the change needed for our clients, our communities. So thank you so much for sharing with us, Ralph. Pilar, I believe your hand was up first.
Hi, everyone. My name is Pilar Bonilla, and I am multiracial, but I guess I identify most with Latina because I can actually speak that language, whereas the other ones have been forgotten. As a first-year student who, despite everything, I do love my internship and everything that they do. It's kind of disheartening to see that most nonprofit organizations, or just organizations in general that are social work related, are like, underpaid, understaffed. Like, it's just the same thing, like, over and over. And then I think about the fact that because of COVID, and I came back to school because of COVID, because I had COVID in March of 2020. And that was like my wake-up call for me, where I was just like, I need to live. I'm not like, I was existing, not living. So I came to school full of hope. And then to see that, because of state and city politics that the school did not have enough funding. And so therefore, there were hiring freezes, and a lot of students, sorry,
So sorry about that interruption.
okay. So a lot of students had to drop out last semester, and they were all like BIPOC students because I was lucky enough to actually start my internship on time, but others weren't. And some were told that they would have to, work into the summer. And that's just not possible. Like if that happened to me, I would have had to drop out because I am one of those students who has SSI. And therefore I am very limited. I can't even work over the summer. I volunteer, and that's what I've been doing before coming to school. I've been volunteering, which is what led me to believe that I want to be a social worker. But also just seeing how the system is just so I don't know, everybody's just almost okay. They're fine with accepting this. I don't even know how to describe it, but how is it okay to be making less than cost of living? How is it okay to have social workers who are on food stamps, living in shelters, and going to organizations to help others? How is any of this okay? I want to help, but I don't want it to affect my health, and my health is pretty not the best as it is, And I don't feel like there are enough resources out there for social workers or social work students. We talk about transparency. I was told from the beginning, be transparent about any disabilities that you have. I do not like the word disabilities, just able, disabled. I understand the reason for it, but this whole drives me nuts. And then, so then I'm transparent just enough, and then that gets thrown in my face. So as I'm applying for next year's internship, I'm thinking to myself, well, if I don't put anything down, then they can't use that as an excuse to reprimand me. And they'll have to think of something real. I don't know, I'm frustrated. At the same time, I know that this generation is a newer generation, and we've seen a lot and we've been through a lot. I'm not saying that other generations haven't, but this generation, I feel, is more fed up and less willing to take anybody's, And the only thing is that we are not united. The students are not united, whether it's micro, macro, whether it's because some are more extreme than the others, or their mentality is just, but we aren't united. And we could be so much stronger if we were all united. And I don't understand why that isn't coming into fruition. I mean, I ask questions in class. I have no problem saying, speaking my mind, but all that's gotten me is just my reputation for having a big mouth and, oversharing. But I came to school to make a difference. And to me, it's you don't have to like me, but I'm going to do this with or without you. But it would be nice to have some help. That's all.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think you pointed out, several disconnects that we have in the social work field and profession. As you were speaking, you just made me think of the massive student loan debts that, I don't know when I will be able to pay them off. And it's very discouraging. I want to continue my education as far as I can, but it's can I afford that? Is that worth the stress, the overworking? It's a lot to think about as students. So thank you so much for being so transparent with us and sharing that with us tonight.
Just want to support you there, Pilar. And your generation has been through it, and you take a lot less. And this Gen Xer loves you for it. You look at the roots of revolutionized social work, it's students. And look there, and that attitude is going to take you far because you're a critical thinker, and social work needs more critical thinkers like you. So I just wanted to share that with you before we move on to our next person, who I think is Andrea.
Hi, hello, everybody. Just been listening to what's been said. And one, my sister Pilar, I feel you, I hear you. I know it's not right. It's not right. But I think that we have to be able to look clearly and logically at what is happening here. Because for us, no, it's not right. But if you look at who it is we largely serve, and lately, some of the demographic changes that have been going on in the profession. So yeah, for the larger world, it's okay. It's okay for us to be underpaid. It's okay for the services to be underfunded, because look who's using the services. You know, today in my second coffee break, I was listening to the news, and I'm hearing that Russia's been in Ukraine for 2 days, and already they've turned over $54 million to send to the Ukraine for aid. Not that I begrudge them anything, they obviously need the help. But my point being that there is no lack of funds available to justify no funding for the services that we provide. And I think we have to look clear-headedly at where we are and what we're dealing with, because first off, the term nonprofit is a misnomer. We know that. The so-called nonprofits pull in quite a lot of money. It just doesn't filter down to the end of the people that are doing the work, but people pull in a lot of money. So we have to be clear about that. And I think we also have to be clear about it's a business. It's a business. And what's the goal of business? To stay in business and to keep pulling in money. There is no profit in our clients getting well. There's no profit in them staying sober. There's no profit in them staying out of jail. And I could keep filling in the blank if you go on and on. So that's the real deal, is to keep the system churning one way or another. Because if by some miracle, everybody that was substance abusing became sober in a week and stopped using, this country would lose its mind. Because think of all the systems that one person feeds. They feed the medical, they feed the criminal justice, they feed the social service. Some of them are in the homeless system. All of those people, they feed all of those systems. And that means there's continual income and revenue for all of those systems. So there is no profit in them getting well. There's also the other sociological and racial and class effort in that there's no profit in them getting well, because it is a control mechanism also. So that we just have to be clear about what's going on here. There is no commitment to the goals that we as social workers or medical professionals have individually. There is no commitment countrywide or statewide to those goals. They'll say it, they'll come on and they'll have a speech and they'll talk about how, oh yeah, we have to get ahead of this, we have to do this. They won't, but they don't do it. They give little bits of money, they give little things here that, oh, it looks like they're doing something. They're not solving the problem. And don't be confused that they don't understand what the problem is. They do, but there is no motivation to actually solve that problem, because then it stops fueling their machine. And I think we all have to be clear about that. I never underestimate the larger system. They're not naive. They know exactly what the problem is, but they have no motivation to fix it.
I wanted to speak to that. Thank you so much for your words, Andrea. I wanted to also comment with what Ms. Pilar was saying. One of the things that she had mentioned just kind of stood out is being the most vocal and being labeled as, you're causing trouble or you're going against the system. And I feel like those that speak out are actually those that really do experience what it is that some of, our clients or patients go through. I also wanted to comment again too with Miss Andrea, like I haven't thought of that, like the fact that our clientele and our patients do go through these treatments is considered like a safety net for us in the economy. Is like, if the more they need the more they need assistance, the more they need support, then the more job security I have. And that's kind of like the downfall of it. And I was just reflecting on that as well, as all like, we need to unite, as Pilar was saying, but we need to unite in ways to where we can help community instead of organizations or corporations that utilize funding for those people of color or for those that are definitely in need, just so that they can continue to get the grants. And grant funding is also one too that is so misused in regards to what it's actually used for. And so I just kind of wanted to comment on that. So thank you both for your words.
Thank you, Kelly. Peter, your hand is up next.
Hello, hi everyone. My name is Peter Matira. I live here in Hawaii, and thank you for this topic. And I really appreciate the speakers. And Pele, I hear where you're coming from. So I teach social work at Hawaii Pacific University, and in particular around this issue of revenue generation for nonprofits. And the reality is that the nonprofit sector, if you think about it, is not sustainable. I mean, or grants are not sustainable. So when you tie anything to Wall Street, like the nonprofits, then you virtually are vulnerable to what happened in 2008 with the financial crisis. I don't know about your states, but here in Hawaii, around 30% of nonprofits lost their income because they weren't getting their grants. And just for some context, I'm in probably one of the smallest states, right? We have like 1.5 million people here in Hawaii. But for that population, we have almost 8,000 nonprofits. And around 6,000 of those are 501c3s. I mean, it's a massive industrial market, right? It's huge. And the three things that nonprofits, I think, perhaps in your states as well, struggle with are revenue generation, holding on to excellent staff because they're not paid enough, and rising costs. And so the question is, how do you continue on when you're vulnerable to the markets? People get disillusioned and they leave, in spite of you being an excellent nonprofit, doing great work in the communities. And so, I just want to say that we have to not be fearful of capitalism. We have to figure out how we know more about it, and then we radically shift it. We've got to do that. It just makes sense. And I don't know if you're in any universities or schools of social work where you are actually trying to wean students off grant writing and head towards more kind of social enterprise, social, entrepreneurship, writing business plans for community organizations, sort of moving or shifting a nonprofit to sort of like a readiness or a preparedness for people to invest, because the whole point of the nonprofit kind of industrial complex is to create a dependency of nonprofit organizations on grants. And talk to any executive director, they'll tell you that they stress out writing grants, trying to pull in funds from just a range of different funding sources, and that is incredibly exhausting for everybody and stressful. So what I teach my students, or share with my students, is we got to figure out a way to fix that, to stop the the sort of the exodus of excellent workers from the nonprofit sector. So the reason they leave is it's lack of good salaries, and it's sort of, they're vulnerable. So how do we do that? And it's, social workers, we are so primed, if you like, to move into this particular field of I'll just end on this point. We talk a lot about social justice, and we understand what social justice means in terms of practice. But we add on to that the term economic justice, but we don't actually know what that means, right? It means understanding how capitalism works, figuring out how to undermine it. My theory is that capitalism is incredibly cannibalistic, and it will continue to eat itself. But we have to figure out, in terms of as social workers, how, I'm more inspired to teach my students about sort of subverting capitalism. But in order to do that, you got to know about it, right? You have to know what makes capitalism so vulnerable. And so that's just my point. But I appreciate you listening, and I'll stop now.
Thank you. Thank you, one, for joining us from Hawaii, and also for sharing. You bring up fantastic points, and kind of was getting at to our second question, which I think I just wanted to pose while folks are kind of heading in that direction. It seems of like, as social workers, as people, as individuals, what are we, to do about this? Like, I think we always talk about social work, and this might be just a personal experience, but like, a lot of times I'm in classes and it's like, here are all these issues, and it's like, no, that's so cool. What are we supposed to do about these things? Like, no one's ever really telling you how to do it. And of course, I think Andrea brought up the point, like, if they told you how to solve the system and how to break it, like, social work itself would need to break itself down. And I don't think they necessarily want to do that. So it's like us in this conversation, just thinking about like, how do we begin to try to fix it and go in that direction, and like actually make some sustainable change, instead of continuing this cycle of like pulling people out of the water, but like eventually like asking, like, how are these people ending up in the water? Like, what are we doing about the people who keep falling into the water, instead of just always like trying to take them out? We will forever be in that cycle. So if folks have extra thoughts on that too, please, of course, raise your hand and share with us. But I think Kristen is next.
I'm sorry, just before Kristen, but I do want to amplify that this space is for amplifying BIPOC voices. If you identify as a white ally, we are asking that you please use the chat. And just a side note, we do have our Racial Justice Forum upcoming on March 17th, where we invite all folks to share their experiences in that forum. But this space tonight is for BIPOC voices to be amplified by unmuting, and for white allies to use the chat function. I'm so sorry, Kristen. Thank you.
No, you're fine, Olivia. I love that as a rule. I want to carry that into other spaces where I know allies are very well-meaning, but are taking up space. So, but thank you so much for this conversation. I could have it all night. It's something I think about constantly as a professional and also an instructor in the field. But nonprofits, when I think about them, they are designed deliberately to fill gaps created by the government to keep people down. As a result of that, nonprofits draw people who are the kind of people that want to fill these gaps for the government. They want to do these things and improve lives for people who oftentimes look a lot like them or come from similar experiences and backgrounds as them. And as a result, they're drawing in a lot of really well-meaning people. And so I brought up the term moral injury in the chat, and a lot of people had a lot of agreement there. As a result of being in this profession, you end up participating in systemic and systematic oppression, and it just bleeds you dry. It deliberately preys on humans, and it preys on the human condition to profit off of human suffering. And also as a result, consequently, I mean, a lot of nonprofit industries are white savior factories. And so folks are coming into communities as outsiders, especially folks that are moving to communities that maybe they're going to school for. And, you know, I teach a BSW class. We talk about this all the time, gentrification and the way that we perpetuate those cycles in the communities that we enter. And so all this to say that the way nonprofits uplift inequity is by profiting off of it. So nonprofit is honestly just a tax code. They are capitalist and corporate infrastructures just like any other business, which I've seen a lot of agreement on already. So again, just I'm really appreciating this space. And I needed to hear a lot of this validation. It's really comforting to know that I'm not alone in feeling these things all the time while continuing to be in the system. It's a big reason why I moved from a clinical setting to a macro policy setting. But thanks everyone for those that have shared already.
Thank you so much, Kristen. I think you really highlight the point that doing this work is, you know, a roller coaster of emotions. And it's like, when do we get off this ride? When will it end? So thank you so much for sharing. Tiana, your hand was up next.
Yeah, I also wanted to thank everybody for sharing some very insightful thoughts. I love hearing other people's ideas and perspectives on things. You know, it gets my brain running and just thinking about a lot of stuff. And, you know, just thinking about capitalism itself, it does consist of like mainly white, cisgender, able-bodied men who are wealthy or making money off the stock market or through generational wealth. And so within that, I feel like when it comes to nonprofits, especially people of color and BIPOC and nonprofits, they are usually met with like resilience, resistance, or hostility when they're trying to go against the status quo. So it's like, if you're not willing to listen or advocate or be an ally for the people who are trying to create that resistance, trying to create that coalition building, then it seems like somebody said you don't have no motivation for the system to change. And, you know, I've heard and believed that the system wasn't built or made for Black or Brown communities and organizations. So there will be a lack of motivation to change politically, especially in the political aspect when it comes to legislative and political leaders who are against, you know, community building and trying to just step back as a person who isn't a person of color, to let our people come together to, you know, systemically change what we know needs, you know, change, what we know needs to be better, what needs to be better for our communities and for the people who face racism and other types of system oppression daily. So that just goes in with the not understanding the concept of like intersectionality as well, just not understanding that a lot of people have a lot of different experiences that they go through as people of color who also suffer from other system oppressions. So I just think, you know, capitalism and a nonprofit industrial complex combined doesn't take accountability for that, because some people are just very ignorant to the fact that the system just wasn't built for Black and Brown people to elevate, to have successful careers, or for the poorer to keep getting poorer and the rich just keep getting richer. You know, that's just how the system has been working for decades and years. So it's really difficult as social work students and as the social work profession within itself to feel or to continue to be motivated that we are actually making some type of change, you know, especially from the policy perspective. Like I've usually, as an undergrad student, just learning about the private practices, but this internship in policy is really different for me, but it's more of a motivation. Like this is the part in my life where I feel a little bit more motivated if I'm learning and being more educated about the knowledge and power in the political field. I feel like the political world runs society, it controls society, it's built on everything from law to policy to just public relations and private relations with other people in the social work field and in the government. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing all of those excellent points, Tiana. Something that just came to mind as you were speaking, you know, the system isn't built for BIPOC folks, but then also when people do think about it, it's like oh, one size fits all, like a checkbox. And that's not how, BIPOC folks are at all. So thank you so much for sharing that with us tonight. And Soyel, your hand was up next.
Hi, my name is Soeli. I use them pronouns. I am a person who identifies as Black and living with a disability. And I say that to say, oftentimes in most of my classrooms, I am the only trans person there. Oftentimes in all my classrooms, I am the only one who's very vocal about my disability. I have bipolar disorder. And I say that to say, I think that transparency is something that it's not taught and it's purposeful, right? There's been many times where I've experienced racism from professors, and in order to possibly report them, you first need to know who they are, but you can't find them anywhere on the website. You can't find their information anywhere, right? And I think that if you consider the MSW program as a microcosm of social work and of the field, it's almost parallel, right? Like you have all these people who are chasing money and not really considering and thinking about the people who they're supposed to be serving. And we've said this multiple times tonight, that students are the place where change actually occurs, but who is supporting the students, who is teaching the students how to survive that, right? Like I think that oftentimes, and I've heard this before in my classrooms, that you're the generation that's going to change things, you're the generation that's going to make things better. However, when do we have time for rest? When do we have time to take care of ourselves? When do you have time to live our lives, be happy, right? I look at a lot of my professors and I'm like, how do you have families? How do you make money? How do you do this? And it's because they have multiple streams of income, and it took them years to get to that place. And I don't want that for myself, nor do I want to continue to see people who look like me, who love like me, in systems who are leaseless and for the system to not identify it as a epidemic, for the systems to not understand that leaselessness leads to mental health issues lead to people being on the street. But instead of focusing on how to make things better, or even recognizing that you bring students new into these programs, they are doing part-time jobs, paying to do part-time jobs, doing life-changing work, right? Oftentimes we don't think about that either. The fact that people who are into your field services, as a case manager, as a budding therapist, whatever you want to call it, oftentimes the work that you are doing can possibly save or kill someone. And we don't talk about that. We don't talk about the stress about that. I think we said 2 years ago, self-care was added as a pillar of the NSW's important work. But what does that look like? It's more than just taking baths. It's more than just waking up in the morning and doing some yoga, right? And I think we don't talk enough about the mental health of the helper. We don't talk enough about, it's one thing to be a therapist for 5 different people on one single day and only have therapy yourself one day. We don't talk enough about that. We don't have unions for social workers. And for me, it when we talk about the industrial complex, we don't talk about who's the people running these programs. They're not social workers. They're not people who have lived experience. As someone who might have experienced homelessness at different points, they're not people who have disabilities or open about it. They're people who hide that. They're people who have business management skills. They're people who look good on paper, right? And oftentimes I will say this too, that they may look like a person of color, but they're white coded, right? They oftentimes are people who know how to, because they look one way, right? They know how to play the game, right? Like on paper, they look like they're Black, so they check off a box. They look like they're a person of color, so they check off a box, versus is their heart in it? Are they the ones actually doing the work? Do they know what the works look like? Can they name a program? Can they name a participant, right? And I realize I'm taking up a lot of space, but I just think that in reflection of everything that we've been saying too much, I hear on one side that it's my generation and we're the ones supposed to be doing the work, which is great. I'm down to do it. I'm down to coalition build. But at the same time, where is the priority that my rest comes in? And even the quote by Audre Lorde, where she's saying, it's an act of political warfare, why does my rest have to be anything but just me sleeping? Why does it have to be anything other than me prioritizing myself? Why does it have to be something where it's still me fighting against something else? And to be honest, I just think that, and I said it in the chat, that the goal of social work should be to eradicate itself. But how do you do that when you're creating the same people or populations that suffer the same thing? Why do all my friends I know need to have roommates, right? Why do all of them, there was 2 weeks in the beginning of the semester where I had someone else buying me groceries because I couldn't afford it, because I'm sitting here paying rent that is astronomical and paying for school. And we don't talk about that. There's no space to talk about that. There's no space for in these schools to talk about, okay, I don't have access to enough money. I don't have access to food. How do we make this work during a global pandemic? You know, and I think that's the part that also just makes it wild, is we have seen worldwide suffering and we still care more about money. It's always money, it's always profits over people. And it just seems very impossible to me to be a person, do this work, and still find ways to find moments of joy. But that was a lot, but thank you for letting me sort of get some of that out.
Of course, anytime. This is 100% the space to, you know, get all of that out. I 100% agree with you on everything that you said. You know, us social work students, I feel like there's so much pressure on our backs to, you know, create the change that we're all seeking to create, but it's like our hands are full. Like you said, where is our support? How are we supposed to take care of ourselves? And someone put in the chat, like, our rest isn't even really rest. You know, there's so much pressure to continue going. And then that just leads to an earlier burnout. So it's like I said before, it's really a roller coaster. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, and then it also made me think about, like, I've been in classes where students will be blamed for, like, not doing it well enough. Like, I just find it absurd that I can intern in a 2-year program, immediately jump in and be helping the most vulnerable populations. I ask for help. They say your internship site should be teaching you. I'm like, okay, well, they're not. So what is school supposed to be doing? Then the school's like, well, we are teaching you, blah, blah, blah. Like, no one is like really teaching us well how to serve these populations. And then when we do speak up, like Pilar mentioned, like, we get reprimanded. So it's like there's consequences for being the generation that like speaks up, which is like great. There's always consequences. Fine, I'll take them. Whatever. This is not the first consequence since like I show up, I'm Black, I have consequences anyway. But like it's like we also don't talk about the fact that they want us to be the generation to stand up, but also we are the generations that's being reprimanded and pushed down and told don't do this, don't do that, as if they're not some of the gatekeepers from us doing what we need to do to like make it better. So it's like, you know, we want to be the generation, like we do. I know several people in this generation who like are ready for change, we're tired, we're fed up, but also like Pilar had mentioned, like, we're not really united. It's like sometimes it feels like, yes, you're the generation to do it, but it's like, well, we all are here together. You know, we're all facing this thing and we all could just decide, like, let's just do it together and well. But it's like, we cannot continue to act like this won't end in the eradication of our profession. And I think people get uncomfortable with that because it's like, yeah, that means you won't have a job. Cool, but that also means there's millions and millions of people who are not suffering every day, trying to figure out how they're going to eat, how they're going to work, how they care about their mental health, how they're going to do this. Like, I would rather not have a job. You know, I could do something else with my life instead of like spend it in burnout and wondering like how to address this large ass system. I can barely figure out my life on a day-to-day basis, and now I'm trying to figure out a system. Like, you know, it just can be a little overwhelming to think like we're supposed to be trying to like solve this big thing, and like I'm in it and I want to do it, but also it's just like, I think like Swally mentioned, like, when do we get a break that is not like an act of resistance? Like, I just want to take a nap. I don't want it to be an act of resistance. Like sometimes I just want to go to sleep, you know, like I don't want it to be anything else except that, like, it just kind of reminds me of like the strong Black woman. Like, no, I want to be so soft and like fragile, and I want it to be okay and to not be harmed, you know. And it's like you can't, it's like almost like you can't do those things. Anyway, that's what it made me think of. I don't want to mess up your name, but you're the only person with your hand raised. So please, last name Carter.
Yes. Yes. My name is Alicia. Hello, everybody. So I actually reside in Virginia Beach, and I am African American, or whatnot. So I didn't know. I know what y'all said earlier, you know, so I didn't want to say that just because right now I'm kind of taking care of both my daughters, so I didn't want y'all to see the chaos here. But anyways, thank you all for this session tonight. It has been very eye-opening. I am currently a graduate student at BCU, and I'm on the clinical track, but I'm also of social work, but I'm also receiving my nonprofit graduate certificate as well, and school social work credits so that I can get my licensure. So long story short, I agree with everybody pretty much tonight. I feel like there is not, first starting with students, it's not enough support for us. Like for me personally, you know, I am, like I mentioned before, I'm a single mom. Both my kids have autism, and my mom, even with my mom, my mother had passed away in the midst of me being in grad school. So I remember at that point, people within my school, you know, like higher ups, they were feeling like I wasn't emotionally stable and things like that to get through this program. And so I said, no, like I still want to stay in this program. You know, I got kids to think about and feed and things like that, you know, because I'm trying to get another degree so that I can get a better job. And so that was, I mean, just feeling like I didn't have that support from some of my higher ups at the time was definitely defeating. But then now, you know, fast forward, they see me still doing my thing in the program. Now they're like, oh man, like you still going. Okay, congrats, you know, things like that. And so I'm just like, I'm not like, it's one of those, exactly what you were just saying, Rox. It's like you want to have that space to just feel like, can I just breathe for a second? Can I just have time for myself? Can I just, you know, just things like that. But no, you have to continue to be that strong person. I still haven't had a break since my mom passed away. And that was like 2.5 years ago, almost 2.5 years ago. I still just been going. And so long story short, I added the nonprofit management onto my certificate or to my degree, just because one, I don't see myself going back to school after I get this social work thing. And two, I was just like, you know, I'm just in this space, to be honest, to where I feel like I want to just create my own stuff and to help people some kind of way without the government trying to destroy it, you know, try to help the system, still try to work with the system in some type of way, maybe with partnering or something instead of working for them. Because I'm just like, at this point, I see my mom, she worked for the system. She was a what's that word? A sociologist. She's a sociologist, and she did some case management work as far like in the foster care systems as well and things like that. And I just seen a little bit of a glimpse of how the system is, you know, and then just even me doing my internship and not having support with that, as well as I keep telling them, like, down here, it's like, where do I put my kids trying to do free internships, you know? And especially with my kids having autism, my oldest has behavior. So not babysitters and facilities don't really want to take her in, you know, and things like that. So I'm just like, so I'm going to sit here and do free internships all day and night while nobody really want to take in my baby. So, I mean, it's one of those things where it can be so stressful. And I'm just like at a point where I'm not even gonna lie, like I started just Googling like social workers who have their own businesses, even some social workers who became millionaires, but they're giving, like, they became millionaires, but they're still helping so many people. Like, they doing their own thing and just, you know, things like that, feeding so many people and stuff. And now that's where I'm at. I'm just like at a point where I'm not about to be sitting here fighting all this all day and night. I still advocate, don't get me wrong, because I've been advocating for these policies down here to change. Like, me and some parents, we've been advocating, especially with the special needs policy, we've been advocating with that. So we did get some policies changed down here that the Senate was trying to pass. So I still be out there advocating in my community and things of that nature. But as far as just working and things like that, especially for little pay, and I've seen some of my supervisors are working for little pay, they're stressed out, and they are so knowledgeable about so many things. They create programs and helping so many people and everything, and don't even barely get paid anything. And I'm just like, no, and we're not paying all that student debt back, all that student debt for this, you know. And I'm like, something's gonna have to change. Now I do feel like one day I might try to get into the political arena, but actually try. I don't like politics like that, but I know that exactly what y'all said. It's like we have to get in that arena to make these changes. And I'm like, listen, if I have to do something like that, I will do it. You know what I mean? Like, we have a strong back end. I'm definitely down for that, you know. But other than that, as far as like individual selves of just us, like supporting our family, supporting ourselves, and just getting self-care and stuff, I'm just like, this is just not, a lot of this is just not it, unfortunately. And I'm like, I'd rather create something that's going to really help the community, you know what I mean? Like, because it's just sad, you know? It's just really sad out here, for real.
It is. Thank you so much for sharing with us, and I'm sending my condolences to you and your family. You know, I'm so sorry. It's like you couldn't even take that time for yourself in that moment because, like you said, you know, you're at an internship being unpaid and you have your whole family to take care of. It's like, it's a never ending cycle, one thing after another. And it's like, when will we see a change? So we are approaching 7:30, and I would love to end off on, you know, we've heard all of this, and how can we go about it to kind of seek the change that we are hoping to create as social workers? You know, how can we kind of start to dismantle these systems, if anything? So if anyone has any thoughts on that, please feel free to share. Pilar?
So my long-term goal is to overhaul the healthcare system, but I'm realistic enough to realize that I can't do that until this system here gets fixed. And that's why I posted about the social work equity campaign, because they're trying to do something. We're talking about like no more of this free labor, getting treated like, you know, a certain way that we shouldn't be. I'm sorry, I curse a lot, so I have to like hold back. And there's just so many changes that need to be made within the system. And yeah, wouldn't it be great if one day social workers are needed? But right now they are. We're needed. And if we're going to be needed, let's take care of ourselves first. And yeah, that means I would love to nap. I need 10 to 11 hours a day. And then I'm doing an internship that's 24 hours because you have to count lunch, don't forget. And then I'm taking full-time classes, 15 credits. And then they wonder like, why aren't you taking care of yourself? Obviously that, you know, you don't know self-care. You're not following the code of ethics or some crap that they'll put out there to blame the student because they can't take ownership of the fact that they're helping create the mess. Or the fact that like a lot of students come into the social work field, and maybe it's because I have life experience. And so I'm sorry, but from the very beginning, I was like, don't try to sell me a dream that's not there. This isn't some utopian fairy tale world. This is real. I am one of those freaking victims. I got screwed over by SSI. I have medical conditions that I should have known about before school started, not in the middle of a semester. And I should have had people who understood instead of saying, maybe you should take the semester off. And I get it. It comes from a place of great heart and understanding and blah, blah, blah. But that does not help me. If anything, that fuels me and it makes me angry and I want to prove them wrong. So yeah, I hope one day we will not need social workers, but realistically, it's not going to happen. And let me tell you, I hate politics. I used to be a paralegal. I did law school. So I have a lot of student loans. But if that means that like, I'm going to have to like play nice a little bit because I can't do that too much. It's just not me. But if it means I can write policies and get them passed and acknowledge the fact that it's going to be one piece at a time and it's going to be slow going. And I know that there are people who are going to fight against it because it's not convenient for them. It's not convenient for the pharmaceutical company. It's not convenient for the politicians. But I feel like if I knew, well, no, even if I don't have anybody behind me, I'm still going to do this, but it would help. It would help if we could all just be united. And that's all I'm calling for. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, the real truth with us tonight. I appreciate it. I know everyone in the chat is appreciating it. So thank you so much, Pilar, for sharing that with us. And I just want to kind of add to your points. We're doing this all in the middle of a pandemic. It's been 2 years and it's like the years, I don't even know where the time has went, like it's like a blink of an eye and we're in 2022 and it's kind of feels like we're still at the beginning of this, like that itself is emotionally draining. And then on top of everything else that you just stated, it's like, where is the end of this? So thank you so much for sharing that with us.
So just commenting, Olivia, on that last question, from different speakers that I've heard of today, as well as for myself, some of the solutions about what to do with the nonprofit industrial complex and capitalism is walking away from the non-industrial complex. Everyone tells us in social work that we're going to go into a nonprofit. This is just a given. You have to, you're expected to, you're going to internship at. We're not talking about mutual aid. We're not talking about collective care. We're not talking about starting a business. Just be honest and call it a business. Don't call it a nonprofit. And don't be beholden to grants and to the people who give you grants. Create your own vision. And I've heard this. I heard that from one of the speakers earlier about training people, training community, getting out into community, forming collectives. That's just some different ways. It seems like to turn our back on the nonprofit industrial complex seems to be one of the solutions I've heard of today.
I agree. I think, we have, just speaking to what we talked about in the beginning and then listening to everyone speak, like we were told how social work should be structured and organized. And I think that's kind of the concept that it's just led us up to, and we've seen all the negative impacts it has as well, with us as being the providers, being the staff, being the support and the self-care. And I think that right now we are in a time and an age where we can change these things. We can change these structures. We are able to. It can be intimidating because you're going against something that an agency already has these policies in place. This is the structure of how the system works. This is how it's supposed to be. But I think now that we're seeing that change is possible, and we have seen some changes on a positive. I think we can create new policies, we can create new rules, we can create new structures. And to Melody's point is we don't have to keep ourselves where we're not respected, or we don't have to keep ourselves. And it's so easy for me to say that. It is really easy for me to say this because, my social challenges, my struggles are different than everybody else's. But I do believe that we are able to change. We are able to make that change. And now that we know what's wrong with the system, now we know this isn't working, we can definitely come in and we can say, well, you know what, we're going to revamp, we're going to redo, we're going to look at this and possibly make that change and make it a way to where others can follow in our lead. Let's take back those agencies. Let's take back the community, and let's take ourselves back and say, I'm worth more than a paycheck. I'm worth more than doing what you put my job duty and responsibility as. To Pilar's point, we've experienced what we're experiencing. So I think that's what makes us the experts is we're going through financial struggles. We're going through, having to also pay those high prices of what's going on right now. And so we are also looking at those resources. We are also knowing what resource works or not, because these resources, they're there's many out there, but they have criteria. You have to be 18 to 23 to get a food box, or you have to live within this, district to be able to get the financial assistance. And if you have financial assistance, you have to make this amount of money. There's just so many rules to these so-called resources that I feel we can definitely use this as a guide for us to be we need to just revamp.
I think what I'm also hearing folks say is, our universities are part of that complex as well. And I do think students have power. And just the way, when I think of, my colleagues that are adjuncting and, they feel like they're being underpaid. And so schools are a business too. And so I think we have to be, I think we can get what we want. But yeah, we do have to make noise about it. Be taught the things that we want taught. We do have programs. Some folks want to be a social work therapist and they find a program that teaches them that. And that's fine for them. And so I think we can be more discriminating in what we do and how we do it. But and I get it. You're at the last semester, so finish that semester and then, cause some trouble.
Thank you so much for that, Gerald. That's so sweet. But yeah.
Thank you so much for ending us on that note, Gerald. I do just want to ask if anyone else has a comment that they would like to share before we wrap up for tonight's town hall meeting.
I just agree with everybody, especially what Gerald just said as well. And I'm just ready, like you said, after getting a degree, let's make some noise. Let's all get together, we all get in this political arena, and rewrite these policies and start our own businesses to help these communities or whatever we need to do, and I'm definitely down to support you all as well. We can support each other. So thank you all for this space. I definitely appreciate you all tonight.
Thank you. Thank you so much to everyone who shared with us tonight. It's definitely inspiring to know that, the struggles that I'm going through as a current social work student about to finish up my master's program, I'm not alone in any of the feelings that I'm experiencing. And I know that, I can call on any one of you and we'll be here to support each other. And like we said, once we graduate, then we can start making that good trouble, right? So thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Before we wrap up, I'm going to put a link in the chat for our next town hall meeting. I'm so excited for this topic. Our next topic on April 7th is For Us, By Us, Strength, Joy, and Community. The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. So I'm going to put that link in the chat right now. Oh, I'm so sorry. That did not paste as a link. Just one second. Okay, there we go. I'm so sorry about that. There is the correct link to register for our next town hall. Once again, it is on April 7th. And the theme of that night is For Us, By Us, Strength, Joy, and Community. The master's tool will never dismantle the master's house. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight and sharing your experiences and all the messages in the chats. And this recording will be on our YouTube channel tomorrow, as well as posted to our Revolutionize social work website. Have a great night, everyone.